Hi, I'm Mike Damergis here along with Dr. Jeanne Zaino from the Department of Political Science here at Iona College. And big news here in the GOP as Jeb Bush pulls out of the race.
Yeah, Jeb Bush is out of the race. The front runner came in last year, had all the money, all the name recognition, all the support of the establishment on the Republican side. And he ended up dropping out of the race because he couldn't make a go of it either in New Hampshire or South Carolina. And we knew going into South Carolina that if he couldn't at least beat Marco Rubio, at least do better than Marco Rubio, there was a good chance he was going to have to get out of this thing. And he did on Saturday night. He came in around 7-8% Saturday night. Marco Rubio in second at about 23%.
Did Jeb's campaign people underestimate Donald Trump? And maybe Jeb just underestimated his appeal to the American people?
I think we all underestimated Donald Trump, and I think Jeb Bush was running in the Republican Party of about 20 years ago. And the party he entered this time around is not the party he remembered. He'd been out of the game for a while. He came in and he seemed stunned that he was fighting all these anti-establishment outsider figures, and they were actually doing better and more appealing to the American public, certainly on the GOP side, than he was. And so I do think it just wasn't Jeb Bush's time. And he didn't really have a message that resonated with people in 2016 the way it might have when his brother ran in 2000 or even when his father ran. So he seems to have, come into a party not really understanding on the ground what was happening. And for that reason, I think he really did have to step back from this thing. And Donald Trump, never run for office, obviously, has come in and really been able to read the GOP voters, particularly those on the ground, in a way that nobody in the establishment seems to be able to do.
But the criticism of Trump is that he really has no message or facts on how he's going to fix things. He says he's going to build a wall, and it just got 10 feet taller. We're going to ban Arabs from coming in the country. It's more like bluster than it really is a message.
Absolutely. I mean, look at the practicality of building that wall, having Mexico pay for it, and exporting 12 to 15 million illegal immigrants. It's absolutely undoable from an economic standpoint. It's certainly not moral. I mean, we know all these things, and yet you look at the exit polls and you see overwhelmingly that people are supportive of his message. In fact, every time he goes on the stump and says he's going to build that wall, he gets thunderous applause. You mentioned the issue of not allowing Muslims who aren't American to enter the country. 3/4 of Republicans in South Carolina said they support that. So these messages, even though he's not backing it up with facts and policy, are resonating with people on the ground. And he has the benefit of not being a politician. So unlike Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush, they've had to run on their record. He has the benefit of running and saying, I'm not a politician. I've never done that before. Here's what I'm going to do. And we don't have a sense how he's going to do it, and yet voters on the Republican side, at least about 35% of them, seem to be okay with that. And what I really think is happening is he's tapped into the anger that has long been on the GOP side, and it's an anger that dates way, way back to when George H.W. Bush, but especially George W. Bush, was in office and promised to do things that he didn't deliver on. That was when the Tea Party began to grow, and he's really come in and he's really energized that base. And now it looks like he has almost what we used to call the Reagan coalition. He's even drawing moderates and independents, because if you look at it, he's not a traditional Republican. He has values that are way more center than the traditional Republican in the old style Republican Party of the 2000s, the 1990s would have had.
And Donald Trump certainly supporting the Democrats through most of his life. A great article in Rolling Stone magazine about Donald's upbringing. Sure, his father was a real estate mogul, Fred Trump, but he made his kid Donald work in the fields, pour cement, pull weeds. Don does the same thing with his kids and his daughter, start from the bottom on the way top. So there is a blue-collar work ethic that must be the people must find appealing of Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. And it was interesting when he said a few months ago that he didn't have much to start off with. His father only gave him about $1 million to start off with, which isn't so bad.
Yeah.
But I think that people really are drawn to the fact that he's been successful, and his campaign is about, restoring America, and he's been able to make the case that he is a winner. And that's why these wins were so important. We saw he dipped a little bit after Iowa, because when you're running and your message is you're going to win, if you start not to win, that's a big problem. But he came back strong in New Hampshire and then South Carolina. And so that is really resonating with people. There's a really angry Republican base that's angry about so many of the changes that Barack Obama brought to the country. They feel like they aren't doing well personally, economically. The country is suffering from the perspective of foreign policy, is vulnerable to terrorism. They are not thinking that their children are going to do better in the next generation. They want change, and they want somebody who's going to, what they think of as restore America. And Donald Trump has promised to do all those things. Of course, as you mentioned, and Marco Rubio has been saying on the stump, he hasn't told us how he'll do those things. But at this point, people don't seem to be worried about that. They really want his message. That's enough for them.
And Pat Buchanan talked about it 20 years ago about building a wall in Mexico, and looks like it might come to fruition. It's really a three-man race right now with Rubio and Cruz and Trump. Who has the greatest appeal here where they could actually overtake Trump as he goes to Nevada, kind of a town he owns, because he does own a hotel there. So if he takes Nevada, there might be no stopping him.
Yeah, Nevada is a huge caucus for the Republicans, in part because it is also a place that Marco Rubio is really familiar with, having lived there and put a lot of time in there. So many people were saying it was a must-win for Marco Rubio. Now it doesn't look like, although the polling in Nevada is notoriously bad, it doesn't look like Marco Rubio is going to be able to win. And people were saying just what you said. You know, you drive down the street, you don't see a building with the name Rubio or Cruz on it, but you do see one with Trump. And so it looks like Trump is going to do very well. Of course, we have to say that caucuses are really, really difficult to predict because it's all about turnout. And Ted Cruz was able to turn out voters in much larger numbers than Donald Trump was in Iowa. I don't think he'll do that in Nevada, but it's a big question mark. But yeah, I agree. If he does well in Nevada, the next issue is March 1st. That's the SEC, or the Southern Super Tuesday. And that is something that is an 11-state free-for-all. And neither Rubio nor Cruz really have the funding, the name recognition, or the ability at this point to appeal in 11 states the way Donald Trump does. You know, if you think about it, these guys have been fighting it out in Iowa, and then going to New Hampshire, and then going to South Carolina and Nevada. One state at a time where they can shake hands and meet people. All of a sudden, this thing is opening wide on March 1st. They have to appeal in 11 states. That's to Donald Trump's advantage. So it does look like he's got all the momentum coming out of South Carolina at this point. That said, this is a game of math. If he can't get over 35-40%, there's still about 60-65% of the Republican electorate out there that's up for grabs. If we see a winnowing of the field, if Kasich drops out, if Carson drops out, if Cruz drops out, you may see a Marco Rubio able to build on some of that and increase his support.